Hi, this is going to be a quick overview, but a full overview for the new KnobScripter 3. KnobScripter 3 is a free and open source complete Python script editor for Nuke. It's a tool that I developed many years ago. I released the first version in 2016 as an exercise for me to learn PySide, and it quickly became something that I was using daily in anything that needed some scripting in Nuke. And I kept improving the functionality for a few years, which I released as KnobScripter 2, and then KnobScripter 3 is the fully refactored version with basically all the menus done properly and quite some new functionalities. So yeah, so there's a full guide for the tool that will come along with it. Again, it's free and open source, and it can be downloaded from Nukepedia and the GitHub repository, which will always be the most updated one. So basically, it's a script editor that can script with Python files. It can script Python directly in the Python knobs of the nodes, and it can also script Python in the callback knobs. So apart from that, KnobScripter 3 introduces the new blinkscript mode. Basically, you can just take a blinkscript node and replace this default editor with the KnobScripter editor, which looks similar in terms of look, which was intentional. But you can use all the functionality from the KnobScripter, search replace, and all the other things, line copying and other sorts of formatting. At the same time that you keep a layer of security so that Nuke doesn't crash. You can access some of the menus that I made for making blinkscript easier to learn and easier to work with, and other stuff. So just as a quick overview, that's this tool. It's a tool that lets you pretty much replace Nuke's script editor, and as you can see, it can be docked into a pane. Like you can go here in Windows, custom KnobScripter, and then you can save one of the default workspaces. So when I do compositing, it comes by default with the KnobScripter. So that's pretty much my script editor. You can run commands as a normal script editor with an output Python console, and then you can clear the console, you can resize it, you can resize the text, which is useful. And another benefit of this is you can, whenever you have a code that you want to keep, you can just directly save it into a PY file, and then you'll have it living somewhere in the hard drive, which if I clicking open, it will just open that folder. It also supports autosave, so at the moment you change something, it will save both, your modified version and the saved one. So there's plenty of things that I would really like to briefly cover at least now. That's the main overview. So how do you bring the KnobScripter? So I already showed the main one I'm using, which is Windows custom KnobScripter, and that will create a pane for that. But for nodes, I'm mostly using the floating KnobScripter, and that's activated by pressing Alt-Z. And that brings this floating window, which on the nodes, the output console is by default closed. You can see that the main difference with the non-node connected KnobScripter is that you have the node here, and you have the knobs of the node, instead of having the Python scripts. So the only difference between those two is that this one is inside of the node. You can click here to get outside of the node and get into the same mode, or you can select a node, click on the picker, and that would go into the node, and then you can script on the knobs directly. So it's all set, or edit, node, open floating KnobScripter. So that's the same thing to open the floating one. So you can open as many as you need or like for different nodes, and as you see, like programming on the knob change or other callback knobs becomes quite easier. You can also, for nodes like this one that have Python buttons and stuff, you can go into the Python buttons as well. And as you can see, comparing it to Nuke's default script editor, the look is not the same. The reason is that there was a new color scheme added, which is the monokey. You see, like more similar to the famous one from Sublime Editor, which is an editor I love. The next thing would be to look into the actual tool, the functionality, and what stuff you can do with the script editor, as well as the floating panels that we have. Great, so for this next part of the video, I'll be organizing it pretty much like the user guide. We just saw an overview of the tool. Now I'll move into the actual modes that it has and more the details on each of them. And after we cover that, I'll do a last part where I go to the script editor, and then we see other utilities that will make your actual scripting easier. So I think that would make sense and follow more or less the contents on the user guide. So I'll start with the Python mode. So as you saw already, the Python mode shares the buttons here. This is to reload. So in this case, if I change the code or I do some modifications, you see this asterisk here, meaning it's modified. Here we would be able to save it and overwrite whatever's there, or we can reload the current script. That's warning us that it has been modified, so we can lose the changes if we want, and it will bring the saved version, and the asterisk is gone now. Apart from that, if there are new scripts added to the folder where the scripts are located, you could just click here and it would scan again through the files and update the list, basically. With the buttons here, we can create a new Python script. So I'll call it test, and that will be test.py. And we can go back to it anytime and work with the autosave and all that. We can also open the folder. That's another useful thing, and that will show where the scripts are living. So by default, it's on your .nuke folder under KS3, KnobScripter 3 directory, where you have all your scripts living there and blinkscript and all that. So that's this files dropdown. Here you have some folders that you can create as well. So we can create a folder called nodes, for example, and then we can create scripts that belong to the nodes folder, and then we can execute them or save them or whatever, or go back to the scripts one. So that's with the Python scripts. And I'll now cover the node mode, which again, you select the node, you click on the picker, it goes into the node, and this is basically the same thing, so not changed. If I do Nuke message hi, now you can see that it's not activating that. The reason is that it's still not saved into the node. So the moment you click save, it will appear in the actual node. Right now it's just stored in memory. So I'll save it now. It's saying hi, obviously, because something changed. If I deselect it, it's saying hi again. So now this is the code that's living in the node. So if I want to modify it, I just do it here. I save again, and now it's gone. So you'll see the callback knobs here on any node you select and you go into. And if the node has any Python buttons, like I'll create one right now, like that Python button, let me do that and just go back to the node. You can see that the Python button is there now. And we can do something like Nuke message hi, and then we save it, which will be activated once we click the button. So that's the main parts of the script mode and node mode in terms of Python. On the right side, you can see a few things that are also quite useful. This command here is the same as selecting whatever and pressing Control Enter or Command Enter in Mac. And that basically executes the full code of this in the Python console. If you just want to execute a single thing, like this, you can select it and then click here or Control Enter, and that will execute only your selection. If you don't select anything, it will execute the whole thing, as you can see. Next, I'll cover this in a second. You have find replace, which you can do like, okay, let's find hello and say goodbye, and then that will replace all the occurrences. I don't think I need to explain this too much. And then here you can see all the extra options for the tool, which I will also cover after we finish with this. So this was the Python script mode and node mode. And something that's new, as I mentioned, is the blink mode. So now in KnobScripter 3, you can select a blinkscript node or any node basically that has the blinkscript script editor knob inside. And then when you click on pick or open a floating KnobScripter, you will see that this whole thing changed to scripting blinkscript basically. So there's a few things that I found really useful for my blinkscript workflows and also for learning it and accessing the reference guide and all of that. And these are the main ones. So as you can see, here you can switch between the blinkscript knob and the normal Python knobs, Python buttons and everything. And the only change is not only the color scheme, but also the functionality that's inside of it. So when you switch into blinkscript mode, you can see a different set of buttons appeared here. So this play button will save this code into the blinkscript node and execute it. And here you can select the option to autosave to disk on compile, which means that I select that, I'll just do test, kernel, whatever. And then every time you click on play, it's saving the code here, it's saving the code in the file and it's recompiling it. So if Nuke crashes, it's also saving the actual Blink file, which is quite useful in this case. That it's quite a prone node to crashing Nuke if you've tried it. So yeah, that's the blinkscript main functionality in terms of menu and compiling and executing. And the other thing that I found would be a nice addition to it is the keyboard hotbox. So in any Blink specific keyword, such as eRead, you can see the different options here. And if you hold your mouse there, you will see the full documentation for it. So okay, let's do eWrite. What's the access method? So what's the difference? Then you can read it there directly. And as I was referencing the blinkscript guide again and again, I thought that would be nice to have there. Image computation kernel. So there's different options, which, by the way, the only one you can use in the blinkscript node is this one. But it's good to have the documentation, I guess. Pixelwise, types of variables. So this is like there for a number of things. And if you're not sure, you just try double clicking and stuff. And sometimes it will just show you the different things you can do. That's one of the main things for the Blink mode. And again, please feel free to read the documentation properly and you'll find more stuff. And we are back to the normal KnobScripter with the file mode. Okay, in this part, I'll cover the main features of the actual script editor. So again, referencing the guide, you can see some of them here, but I'll basically cover the ones that I'm using the most. So as you saw, there's syntax highlighting in both Python and blinkscript. If you define functions with arguments and variable types and all of that, like docstrings, you can see that the whole style was adapted to Dunction. The whole style was adapted to show you the code more nicely than the actual default Nuke script editor. Also, when you're creating new lines, it's keeping the indenting with spaces that you can select in the preferences. And yeah, that's most of the syntax highlighting part. One thing that I'm using a lot is the line duplicating. So if you press Ctrl-Shift-D for duplicate, you can duplicate the lines if there's nothing selected. If you select multiple lines, Ctrl-Shift-D will duplicate the whole thing, basically. So you can see that it duplicated all the lines. The other thing that you can do with that is, apart from, again, Ctrl-Shift-D or Command-Shift-D, you can do Command-Shift up and down. And that will move the lines up and down. Yeah. You can also multi-line comment stuff by just selecting all the lines and pressing the hash key. So that will add a hash to all the lines. And if you do it again, it will just remove it. More stuff. You have the tab menu like you have it in Nuke. If I do something like Nuke and press tab, it will show me everything that starts with Nuke. Another handy feature I added is that if I do something like fruit equals apples, something like that, and we are programming down here and we need to access that variable, so you add fr, press the tab, and then it will just complete it. If there's a second type of fruit, so fruit 2, and I do FRU, for example, now it's giving me both options, so you can just auto-complete it more easily. Okay, more stuff. So similar to other script editors, such as Sublime, whenever you open parentheses, it's closing it. Same with brackets. Whenever you open quotes, it's closing quotes, and so on. I might be forgetting something for sure. So that's most of the stuff that you can find there. Of course, you can see that there's line numbers, which is a great thing to troubleshoot mainly. Then you can do Control or Command plus and minus to make the font bigger and smaller, which I'm constantly using, especially for teaching, where I want the text to be as big as possible. So that was the script editor. Actually, it wasn't. So I finished the video, I was about to upload it, and then I had an idea. So I started just making a quick fix, and that quick fix took me like 1 month. So this is me 1 month in the future, finishing this last part, and then I'm uploading it. Yeah. So I'll show you the new thing I made. And I promise this will be released 3.0. Anything else will be 3.1 from now on. So there's 2 new things I just added. One is called parentheses function wrapper. So this is how it works. I just made a quick snippet named docs, which is just a template for docstrings. If you select any part of a word or a sentence or basically a single line not up to the beginning, and you click on tab, it will prompt for a wrap selection. Then you can do, for example, str or anything that means a function that will wrap that text with parentheses. So you can see that it wrapped the selected text with str and parentheses, and it's selected. Here's a more useful example. So imagine you have a function like Nuke to node whatever, and you're not sure how this works. So you can just select this part, press tab, do help, enter, then it selects help that. Then you can just do Control Enter, and it will give you the help. And then if you just do Control Z, you will go back to the previous state. So basically, while you're programming, you can do these kinds of things. Another example of a thing you might want to do is, for example, we have here Nuke to node var1. We can get bx, for example, is n.x position. And if we want to turn that into an integer, so we can just do that, tab, int, enter, and that's it. So this is how I'm using it quite a lot lately. So that was the parentheses function wrapper. Now I'll be looking into the different panels that you have with this tool that let you perform some optimizations and automations, especially, as well as the preferences. So here you can see the preferences and snippets and code gallery. They all open the same panel, which includes the 3 panels inside at the same time. So I'll start with the snippet editor and snippets. As you can see, this was completely redesigned for anyone that already was using the previous version. So you can basically add keywords or short codes that whenever you write that and then press tab, then it will create a longer code. So I'm using this all the time. I'm shipping the tool with a default collection of codes, but feel free to remove them, duplicate them, and create new ones for you. So for example, whenever you write try and do the tab, it will just create the try except. Whenever you do something like p, it will create a print. You can see that the cursor appears in the proper place. One I'm using all the time is the tn for nuke this node, tk for nuke this knob, deselect to deselect nodes, for example, and you can create like your own custom things. You can see that for deselect it already selected this part, so you can substitute it. That's also something that's well documented on the guide, so I won't cover it too much into detail. But basically you can, for example, in the print with this $$ sign, that's where the cursor will appear. So I'll just do p, and that will create the cursor there, basically. I will now show the second feature, which is the method placeholders for the snippets. So there's many occasions where you, for example, need n.expos plus n.screen width divided by 2, for example. So you can make a snippet for this part, but it needs to know what goes before the dot. So the way it's now working, if you go to snippets, you can see that there's an example on the default snippets right now, and it's called cx and cy. So expos plus, so this is the sign that you'll need. So $_. That will mean if you press tab after a dot, it will use the last word before the dot. Again, as many times as you need. So if I do, for example, n.cx tab, it's just doing that, adding the n again here. That will work with any other code. And here you can find quite some examples for this. And one last example would be this one for the variable placeholders. So if you do like $, and you put any name in the middle, you can use that as many times as you need. So if now I do node name, for example, and I press tab, that will ask me for node title, you see? So I can do John Doe, for example, and click OK. And that will place it in every place that it's here as well. So that's the snippet editor, and that's saving snippets in the KS3 folder in your .nuke directory. So you can basically bring this folder with you wherever you go, and then you'll see the snippets and your preferences, and all of that also ships with that. So you can create snippets for Python, as you're seeing here. If I go into blinkscript, this one for example, you will see that p does not work here anymore, the print. So it's recognizing the language. in a way that the Python snippets only work with Python. You can have Blink snippets, for example, kernel, you see? Then I'll just write kernel, and this will work. And then it lets me check the kernel name. And then you have the all snippets. The all snippets are meant for anything that any language will accept, basically. So one thing with dockable panes in Nuke is that the square brackets do not work for most users for some reason. So I created the B snippet so that you write B and then you press tab and then you get the square brackets. This is such a time saver for me, and I wish this is implemented soon in Nuke. So code gallery, that's the next thing to cover briefly. So it's a sort of gallery for codes. That's all it is, really. Whenever you're using a code again and again and you want to save it, you can basically create a new code gallery item. You give it a title, a description, a category, which you can select the categories that are already there, and the code, the language. You click save, and you'll get a nice organized gallery where you can see and fold and unfold all and basically browse through your codes. That's something I'm using a lot. The default code gallery for this version of the tool is empty at the moment, but my plan for the future is to gather nice codes from users and just like populate it. For now, it's fully functional, and yeah, feel free to use it and test it and see how much you actually benefit from this. And finally, let's cover the preferences panel. So these panels you can access from here and from there, but you can also open it and then go to a different part of it. So in the preferences panel, you can select a different font for the script editor. You can see it here. It updates live, as you are seeing. I'll click cancel so it goes back to default. The font size, which if you do it here and you click save, that's the default font size. If you just do it here, just here and press Ctrl plus and minus, that will not change the defaults. You can set the default dimensions for the floating window, so that at the moment it's 800 by 500. So if I open this, that's the size for the window. There's also a few options to basically where to save the state of the editor in terms of which lines are selected. You can see that, for example, in the blur node, if I come to line 8 and select these characters and then I change to different knob and I come back, it's saving the state of the line that selected the scroll values and all of that. So you can select basically where to save that. We can choose how many spaces to add on the tab press, which I recommend to be left at 4, which is the PEP recommendation. Color scheme, so as this tool is open source, feel free to open the code and create new color schemes. That would be great. And the running context thing is also a nice addition that from version 2.4 or something, where you can basically, when you are programming in a node, for example, in the knob changed, if I do print this node name, it's executing this in the context of the node. So now if I execute it in the floating window, it's saying that this node name is blur1. So basically it's running the code in the context of the node. You can also toggle it temporarily here, but it can be saved by default on the preferences. And the blink save to disk on compile means that every time you open the KnobScripter on a blinkscript node, it will always prompt for saving that before compiling it. I think that was a pretty dense overview, longer than expected, but I hope that was useful in any case. You can find the Nukepedia and GitHub links here, the help, and basically that's the whole thing. So if you need to install it, it's really easy. So look at the documentation. Is basically copying the folder into your .nuke directory, placing this line in your menu.py, and that should be it. This has improved so much thanks to user feedback and to the experience in different companies and all the comments on Nukepedia and GitHub forks by different compositors. So thanks a lot. Let me know how it goes. Let me know if something breaks, and comments and feedback and suggestions are always welcome. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.